Hi, this is Paul. I'm going to talk about the common mistakes made in a data model. I'm going to use the inbound data model as an example. On the screen, you will see on the left, we have a model that hasn't been reviewed and corrected. And on the right is a model that has been corrected. So first of all, let's take a look at the old model. So going to the Explorer, you will find, first of all, a list of the entities. Okay, and the first thing I want to check is to see if there are any duplicate entities. And here you find organization replacement store has been duplicated so many times. And we also have product, which has been named in two different ways, product and product, right? So these are the first mistakes that I have to correct, because I need to bring this down into one entity, and then you can see all the relationships pointing to one single entity. The next thing I want to look for is the naming standard. So here we have a naming standard, and by going into the properties, and you will see a list of the abbreviation. And I noticed that this standard is not updated, so I will have to bring in the newer standard. The next thing I want to look for is whether this model has been hardened. Because if the model has not been hardened, then every time when you bring in a new standard, it's going to change the names done before. Right? So in order to prevent the risk of making changes to the previous naming, I will make sure the model is hardened, and then I apply the new standard going forward. To check the model whether it has been hardened, we have to go to the action and manage name hardening, type selection, select all items. In object selection, make sure all of the items are selected, and then click action. Here you can find that only the validation rules have been checked, and entities, key, and the attributes have not been checked at all. So that means none of the entities and attribute and column names have been hardened. Right? So this will have a risk of names being changed by a new standard. Now let's take a look at the relationships error. Let's go to the organization business unit. As you can see, this organization business unit is tied to different entities. And one of them is the shipment change report configuration. So first of all, you will notice that there is a tenant organization ID which doesn't have the foreign key notation, but then there is another field called organization ID with a foreign key notation. So, and then we also look at the relationship. This one, if you highlight it and then mouse over it, so you will know that this is the parent is the organization business unit, right? But it is pointing to a separate attribute called organization unit. So what should happen is, if you look at the model on the right that I have corrected, it should look like that. The tenant ID should be part of the key, and there should not be a field called organization identifier, right? So this is what it should look like, right? So to correct that, first of all, you have to highlight the relationship, and then right-click it. In properties, you have to specify a row name. The row name should be the same as the attribute name given here. it has to be exactly the same as the attribute name in this entity. So one way is you can come here and then you can highlight it and copy, and then you paste it here to get the exact wording. It will ask you whether you will replace the child attribute. It's just asking you whether you want to update the name, and you should say OK. When that is done, then you will notice that tenant auth ID has a foreign key notation, and the extra column is gone. Organization ID is gone, right? So that will look like that. And the other area I want to point out is that it's important to define the primary key correctly. If you don't, then it will cause a lot of problems to the underlying entities, right? So in this case here, tenant auth ID is not part of the PK. So what I should do is to define that by going into the properties, key group properties, and then include the tenant auth ID. So now you can see we have the correct PK, right? Now, what happens if you want to add multiple relationships to organization business unit? So I'm going to give you one example here. If I want to add one relationship called RDC, then I should specify a role name called RDC, organization ID. And this is the new column. And if I want to add another relationship, then I can add another relationship. And as you can see, once you add the new relationship, it will inherit the attribute name from the organization business unit, which is organization ID, and you have to name it correctly. So you have to right-click the relationship and go to properties and enter a role name. Say I want ship note organization ID, and that will update the name to ship note organization ID. Okay? So now what you see is I have 1, 2, 3 relationships tying to organization business unit. And each relationship will be tied to a different role name. Now let me undo all the changes I have made to this entity. I'm going to show you one more error that I found. So when I right-click on this edge entity, then you will find that one field is defined as logical only. This is the organization ID that has been introduced incorrectly, and the modeler who added this defined this as logical only, so that this field will not be appearing in the physical model, right? So when you go to the physical model, then everything will be appearing correctly. So as you can see, right, so everything looks good, but this is not the right way, okay? The right way is what I have shown you. When you define the relationship, you have to specify the correct attribute name, okay? Don't leave any field here as logical only, right? This is going to confuse any future changes. So when you look at an entity, come here and try to scan if there are any logical only attributes. There shouldn't be any. We should resolve that by removing it. Now let me show you another example that we are not documenting the business key at all. In any entity, we need to have a unique key. And when there is only a surrogate key, like a PO key, it actually doesn't tell you much information about the structure of the data. Right? So what we should look for is what are the business keys in this entity. So on the right-hand side, I have a high-level data model. And I built a high-level data model because it is easier to show a lot of entities related to each other in a smaller diagram. And also, I try to highlight all the foreign keys in the entity. Because when you can see the relationship, then you can understand much better about this entity. In addition, I want to find out what are the business keys. So in this example here, infantry inbound PO has the business key by tenant org ID, PO number, right? So these are the alternate unique key. Right? In the PO line, then the business key will be tenant org ID, PO number, and the PO line number, right? So the notation is AK 1.1, AK 1.2, AK 1.3. It tells you this is the alternate unique key, 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. All right? So how can we do that? Then let me show you. First, you right-click and go to Key Groups. In the key group, you go to define a new alternate key. And then you can specify the field that make up the unique key. And then you have the PO number. Okay. All right. All right. So the reason why it's not showing any notation is because we haven't specified the display properties correctly. So let me show you one more time. Right-click, Properties, and you go to Entity, and here you can say I want to specify the AK. PK is fine, AK and foreign key, okay. And now you can see, okay, this has 1.1 and 1.2 notation. This indicate these are the business key, all right? So if you go to the PO line over here, so we can do it again by defining a new alternate key, which is PO line number, PO number, and tenant org ID. Okay. So 1.1, 1.2, right? And where is 1.3? 1.3 is here. Okay? All right. So this will be exactly the same as this structure here. All right. So now, by knowing the business key, then you understand much better how this data is structured. Because in most cases, when you do joining between these tables, you would be using the business key. All right. So finally, I would like to talk about the presentation of a data model. As you can see in this data model, if I show you the exact picture, if I try to shrink it, so the exact picture will look like that, okay? It is all packed together and they are not sequenced in a logical sequence, and it's very hard to remember the structure, right? So instead of having a detailed data model, we should develop a high-level data model, which is the one on the right-hand side. Okay. Now, the data model on the right-hand side is presented in a hierarchical structure. So that means the parent would be on top, the child would be at the bottom, and then it will flow from left to right in a logical fashion, all right? So try to understand the business process and then sequence the entities in this order, right? So you have so much space to present your entity, so you don't have to worry about not having enough space. And also, all the green lines are the relationships that I have added. So I adopted some color convention that I think is highly recommended. Whenever we add a new object, like a new table or new relationships, we can use green color to indicate that, all right? And then for all the reference tables, like the lookup tables, any reference tables, then we use yellow, right? So, all right. And then for any questions or issues, if you want to write that on the data model, you can put it in red. And for any general comment or information, you can write that on the model in dark color, all right? So that provides us a way to review the data model at a high level, and we can go through each of the entity by talking about the relationship and talking about what are the foreign keys. So for example, we have one entity here called the Inventory Inbound Association POX link. And basically, this is a relationship table. It has multi-relationship, right? I try to discover the unique keys, and but I cannot find out the unique key, so I would record the index. So IE 1.1 to IE 1.5 are the fields that will make the record in a sequence, right? But it's still not unique, right? That's fine, okay, as long as we understand this is not unique. Here is another example of showing the high-level data model of the advanced shipment notice header and the advanced shipment notice detail. So you can see that the header has the foreign key pointing to some of these fields, and then in the child it also have this relationship. Okay, so you can read the model and you can figure out, okay, this is a header, and it has the business key, tenant ID, and the ASN number, right? And then for the detail, we will have the tenant ID, and the ASN number, and then the carton ID, right? So this means that, and then the PO number, right? So this means that at the detail level, so we are capturing the contents by carton, right? Now let me give a conclusion. So today I have covered some common errors in a data model. Relationships are not defined properly, and primary keys are not defined properly, and we haven't hardened the model before we publish it. And these are all the common mistakes. And also, before we finish, I would like to show you a proper structure in the data model. If you go down to the subject areas, in the old model, you see there is a main subject area here, so we don't need that. So we can erase the main subject area, and instead, we should have a subject area or more than one subject area. And in the subject area, we should have two diagrams. One is this is just a detailed diagram, okay? And what should happen is that there should be two diagrams, okay, in the fixed model. There should be a detailed model, and there should be a high-level model, right? So today I will stop here. I will have a different session to talk about how we create a high-level data model, all right? So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can give me an email.